welcome to Let's Talk Diz, a show that gives you everything you need to know to help make your Disney vacation as magical as can be in just about 20 minutes. I'm your host, Jeff Coviello. With me each week is Disney Master Sandy from Easy Diz by Instant Presence Travel Services. Sandy, how are you this week?
I'm beginning to feel a lot like Christmas.
Well, it is approaching the holiday season, which means in Disney World, it is already the holiday season, and it's already been the holiday season. We had talked a couple weeks ago about Jollywood Nights over at Hollywood Studios, and we had said that we were going to talk about Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, and that is what we are here to do tonight.
And to me, that is the kickoff of the holiday season. You've heard me talk before. One of my favorite Disney things that just most people don't think of when they think of Disney are those toy soldiers. And once I see them, the season has begun for me.
Well, you have seen them, and so it definitely has begun for you. So give us a quick overview of where, when, and how much this particular experience costs for folks.
I'd love to. And as you remember from my Jollywood Nights discussion with everybody, we talked about that this is the second year that Disney is having dueling Christmas parties. So you can have Jollywood Nights over at Hollywood Studios or Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party at Magic Kingdom. And so nice of them, they don't overlap. So you can conveniently do both.
It's so benevolent of them to think of that.
It is. What I will say for people not going to the parties, even though I'm going kind of off of your question here.
Sure.
It does mean you need to plan.
Yeah.
Because there's early closings at the parks for both of these parties. And you can do really well planning knowing there is a party, or you can do really poorly showing up and not knowing there was a party.
I totally agree with that. That's one of the first things I say to anybody that's going at this time of year.
Looking at that times guide and knowing before you get there, making a plan, whether you're working with me, another travel specialist, or doing it on your own, knowing the park hours and understanding how that impacts crowds and where you do and don't want to be is key. Because this party started on November 8th, will go all the way through December 20th. So it's about 50 days, not quite, that there are parties, and 25 days of those are parties. Wow. So typically that's 3 nights a week. The park will close at 6 p.m. If you are a party guest, you can get in at 4 p.m. with your party ticket, not needing a regular park admission. At 6 o'clock, as I said, when they close the park, you'll get used to holding your wrist up and showing your wristband, because we've talked in other episodes how the park closing time is the last minute you can get on a ride. And they finally wised up, probably about 6 years ago now, and park closing and party start are 1 year apart, 1 hour apart. I'm sorry.
I was going to say one year would be difficult.
1 year's really long. No, 1 hour apart.
Right.
And that's because if you go back about 8 years, you'd get to the party, you'd have paid this premium to be there and to get on rides, but the queue for something like Space Mountain was still almost an hour long because they had all the regular day guests. So you can start riding anything at 4 p.m. as a party guest. 6 to 7, they bring on a huge number of cast members who literally form walls kind of on all the walkways, and you have to show your wristband. And if you don't have a wristband, you are kind of forced towards the center of the park into those spokes and down Main Street. So yes, it can be crowded at 6:15, 6:30, even 7 o'clock as everybody's jostling and figuring out where they're going. But they do a great job of emptying those queues and emptying the park. And that is all for the price of $169 plus up to $219, depending on your date, plus tax. And that is per adult for one party night.
Now, that variable pricing is based upon, the desirability of a weekend. Obviously, probably as we get closer to actual Christmas Day, that's where we start to see those $219 prices. Is that right?
That's correct. And here's my little tip for you. If you're on vacation, you're probably there for the week.
Yeah.
Like a weeknight party. It's generally going to be a little less expensive unless you're right before Christmas. And sometimes it's going to be a little less crowded. You tend to find the locals are there on the weekend parties because many of them have to go to work the next day.
So you mentioned 169 to 219 for adult prices. This is an event that does not have a kids price. Is that correct?
It does. The kids price, I will say, is such a minimal savings that I didn't even bring it up. Again, people always think that the kids should be so much less because they're kids.
It's just not the way it works.
But the reality is Disney doesn't work that way, even in their regular ticketing. The kids are taking up a spot for the parade. The kids are watching the fireworks. The kids most certainly are getting on character lines. In many cases, if you're a parent like me who has some vertigo issues, as an adult, you're actually doing less stuff than the kids.
Yeah. Well, and I know that there's been a number of things that we've talked about where not only have they cut back on the difference in price, but sometimes they've just eliminated the difference in price altogether in certain events. So
correct. Jollywood Nights, when we talked about it last week, was one price. This does have a child savings. It's $5 to $10 a night.
Got it. So don't plan on saving a ton of money there. And you always said this, and it's definitely true as I've experienced it as a parent, depending upon the age of your children, you might want to think if this is the party for you. If you're not going to be able to hang for many hours into the night, you're spending money kind of foolishly here. So just be mindful of that.
7 to midnight.
Yeah.
And I will say, since we recorded last week, again, off script, but as a comparison for everybody, they did introduce for all on-site resort guests, everybody can buy the Premier Pass now. So one of the things that I always encourage people to think about is you probably don't have an unlimited budget at Disney. Many people go to the Christmas party, not necessarily for Christmas, not for the free cookies you're getting, but for that quicker access to the rides. And when you're looking at numbers like 169 to 219 for 5 hours, sometimes it's worth looking at, is there a better way for me to spend this money to get more out of it?
Right. So we've done this show before. We've done it in years past. Tell us this year what is different about this particular party.
One of the things that I talked about last year that I didn't necessarily give a glowing review to was the character spots. Last year, they had so many character spots and so many unique character spots, but the characters all had very short sets. In many cases, the line was closed before the character even appeared for that set. It was a little tough.
Sure.
Some of them are also a little hard to find because one other big goal that I see Disney working towards is how can we keep the walkways as clear as possible? So they're trying not to put characters on a walkway for hours at a time like they used to. And so they're finding spots that are maybe a little bit to the side of the gift shop, or they're using the spot where the boat that will be no more leaves over by Haunted Mansion. And some people had a little trouble finding them. So this year they made all new character signs that were massive. You couldn't miss them. A big character greeting sign. It was probably about 7 foot tall with a little arrow to direct you. And they made a point that maybe Pluto went in and got a dog bone, or somebody else, maybe Belle needed to go grab a cup of tea. But we saw that there wasn't these big breaks in characters. I'm not going to give away the magic on how they didn't need so long inside.
Sure.
But again, we saw that they really worked hard to allow people that were there to see the characters to keep them out for as many hours as possible. The one downside, we did see a few characters not there that we always had, but we did carry over Jack and Sally, which is always very popular.
Got it. Okay. What else was different about this particular experience than what you had seen in the past?
So one of the things that differentiates this from the Halloween party, you can do trick-or-treat stops and get candy.
Right.
For the Christmas party, it started years ago with cookie and hot cocoa stops.
Mm-hmm.
And all the cookies are nicely individually wrapped by Cheryl's Cookies. They do have allergen-friendly cookies as well. And they used to give out cold hot chocolate. It's the first year in as many years as I can remember that I actually had hot chocolate in places. And again, they worked hard to make it different. Each cookie stop has a different kind of cookie. So maybe you had a red velvet, maybe you had a Christmas tree, maybe you had a snickerdoodle, all different ones. And then there were multiple different drinks, but only one drink per spot. So there were 2 spots that had hot chocolate, 2 spots with eggnog, 2 spots with apple cider. Again, really kind of bringing in some of those seasonal favorites.
Okay.
That used to be the only free food, but thanks to our friends over at M&M's, they were giving out tubes of mini M&M's if you were headed back into Fantasyland, as well as candy canes if you went to visit Santa, which he got a new spot with lots of activity. We've seen him in several spots at parties. There were a couple of years where we didn't see him except in the parade. He took over the tent behind the circus. And so they had a really cute little station. You could make ornaments and write letters to Santa and put them in the box. And then he had a great little set to get pictures. And after you saw Santa, you got a candy cane and a little tube of green mini M&Ms.
So fueled by sugar. We're very fueled by sugar. It sounds
by
like
sugar.
So
I don't know that that's a tagline that they'll be using.
Probably not. But
maybe not quite as fueled by sugar as Halloween.
I don't know. We'll see. But the question I have for you that I think is really on everybody's mind, and I know that the answer immediately is it really depends upon your traveling party, because that's the answer that we give every week. But the question is, like, if you were to develop a strategy for tackling, this particular event, this particular after hours party, how do you recommend people go about it?
Well, it's interesting because I know the question was, how do I recommend it? But Disney actually made recommendations this year that I've never seen them make before.
Okay.
They put out a night owl guide that you could find in the app that was obviously intended for teens. And they say some of the things that I say. For instance, there are 2 parades. If you're staying till the end, go to the second parade. Pick things that young kids are going to do and do them later in the evening.
Right.
And then they put out a young child's guide that really said the opposite. If you're not going to stay all night, go to the first parade. They gave you tips like that. My tips are always think about, what do you want to do in this parade, in this party? Similar to how I now do multi-pass planning with clients. My first question to them when we're talking about their 3 in advance multi-passes is survey your family and find out what everybody's number 1 must do or they will leave there crying is going to be. And hopefully, if you're a family larger than 3, at least 2 or 3 of them have the same thought.
Right.
And you can really put it together that way. It's going to be the same here. Come up with a strategy. What do you want to do? Are you not a big ride family? So you want to see the shows, and having the perfect view of the parade and the fireworks is important. Maybe you want to see the shows, but as long as you have, that 90-degree angle, you're okay. Because if you want that perfect spot, not only do you need to allocate the show time, but you probably need to allocate, depending on what your idea of perfect is and the size of your family, 45 minutes to an hour before it starts to be standing there.
Which takes away from a million other things that you could be doing.
Correct. But maybe your priority is visiting all the characters and picking the characters that you either can't see other times of the year or can't see in the way that we're seeing them. They do a lot of prince and princesses together so that you see a couple and they're both in their holiday outfit. That's a unique opportunity. Definitely the attraction lines are much less. So come up with your strategy. Again, remembering that everybody's creating a strategy. And sometimes you have to think about kind of opposite of what I said. maybe your top three things are Tron, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and Tiana. But newsflash, those are probably on a lot of people's lists.
Right.
So they're all running there to get them done. Where if you do other things and go to them at 10 o'clock at night, when I checked the app at 10 o'clock at night, there was nothing that had more than a 15-minute wait.
Sure.
So, knowing how long you think you're going to make it and having a strategy is definitely key. And I think the other thing is a realistic expectation. And I'll be honest and say I don't think Disney sets that for people.
In what way?
They always talk about how these parties are so limited and the parties are sold out. And I hear from a lot of colleagues of mine, we'll all kind of check in with each other after certain party dates and say, who was at the party on the 25th? What did you think? Was it crowded? Was the weather bad? Because we'll hear from clients, oh, it was very crowded, or I was actually looking online the day after my party and I saw all these comments that they couldn't believe that this limited thing was so crowded.
Yeah.
Well, their idea of limited and yours are not the same.
No, they're not.
I will also say from probably 6:30 to 7:30, I did think to myself, holy moly, this place is crowded. And that's because they're working to get everybody out.
Sure.
As I said, they make these walls of people that make it hard to get around for a little bit, but stick it out. By 7:45, there were places that I walked that there wasn't a person within 30 feet of me. So, set that expectation, be clear. The beginning of the party is always going to be more crowded. It's always going to be less and less crowded the longer you can stay. So don't get disheartened. I heard that from a lot of people. I'm like, no, go over to this spot first. Like I said, everybody's running to something like Tron. Don't run. Go later.
So you mentioned the attractions. You've mentioned characters. We know that those are things that are big times about these particular events. We've talked about them kind of at length. What about some shows? Are there any old shows, new shows, anything that we should kind of mention before we, move on to some other stuff?
Lots of old favorites. So again, maybe if you're doing the party for a second or third time, your strategy changes. Minnie's Wonderful Christmas Time Fireworks, and that is going to be a once a night event.
Okay.
Then something like Mickey's Most Merriest Celebration, which is a stage show that they do modify a little bit each year. That's 4 times a night. So again, go later. Frozen's Holiday Surprise, where they light up the castle. That's going to be once a night. My absolute favorite, as I said, is the Toy Soldiers. So it is the Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas Time Parade, which happens twice a year. And if you've seen it as many times as I did, as I said that name, you heard it being sung to their little tune in your head. But I will say, Disney, if you're listening, you let me down with the parade this year.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure what caused this, but those of you who have seen the parade and are Toy Soldier fans like me, there was only 50% of the number of Toy Soldiers in the past, and not a single one of them playing an instrument. So I don't know what happened to them.
I think that sounds like a letter.
It was disappointing, I have to say. They always have those long coronets that they play, and it's such a integral part of the experience.
Sure.
But we'll make it work.
You mentioned character signage earlier in the show, really kind of in the beginning. Is there anything else about the characters that you wanted to mention that we didn't hit on in the beginning?
They also made a little bit more of an effort to do autograph cards that were special for the season if the character wasn't able to sign. For instance, we saw Aloha Stitch. He was dressed in his red and green Christmas shirt, and he gave out pictures of Stitch on the beach with a Christmas tree pre-signed by Stitch. So those are always good because they help keep the line moving.
Yeah, heck yeah. Okay. You talked about the hot chocolate. You talked about the M&Ms. Anything else food-wise that is worth mentioning for this particular show?
I've talked in past years about all of the time that I have spent searching for food and trying food. And that wasn't the case this year. And in a way, I was a little unsure what to do with myself without hunting down all of the food.
Yeah.
But it was nice that there weren't so many food options and many were really just holdovers from last year. So I didn't spend a lot of my time hunting down the specialty food. They've also made about 50% of it available holiday season while the park is open.
Got it.
So the food hunt is off, which is nice. There, of course, is a new Mickey popcorn bucket for the holiday season, and he is just adorable. But again, I think as they're seeing the popularity of things and trying to cut down on the people who are making a living by buying merchandise and ship it, it's nice to see that something like the popcorn bucket, I mean, they had boxes and boxes and boxes of them. And at one point in the night I walked by, there was no line. At another point I walked by, there were 3 people in line. Where holidays past, I might have been number 70 in line.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they would come and say, we're not sure we're going to have enough for everybody.
Yeah.
So I love that that's what happened.
Was there anything else merchandise-wise that was worth mentioning?
They did take the Star Traders store, and that's where they put the merchandise. So it was easy to get to. Again, moving people back into the park, only available during the party. And I guess to make up for 50% of the toy soldiers not being in the parade, they were the focus of this year's annual pass holder Christmas party shirt. So, of course, I'm the new owner of a shirt. They had pretty limited merchandise, which, again, I'm okay with. If you want a souvenir, there was a T-shirt, there was a Spirit jersey, there was an ornament. There weren't a lot of things, but there were enough for you to have a souvenir of the party and not have the focus on all these people buying stuff for resale, which is very nice.
Well, we're coming to the end of the program. You know, we've mentioned a bunch of things, you know, all over the place here about this particular party. I think the things that you mentioned as far as the stuff that Disney put out for planning are key. Obviously, if they're putting it out for you, they're putting it out for everybody. So just be mindful of that as well. We kind of hit that over and over again. But is there anything else that happened with this particular after-hours party that you think is worth people knowing before we say goodnight?
I think there's just something about the park at night. So if you decide not to spend for the party, make sure you have a night there. They obviously are not taking down trees and they're not maybe having all the characters out, but they have a couple of those big 3D photo opportunities again this year. Those are out all the time. And the PhotoPass photographers are around. So definitely, whether it's your holiday photo card that you're grabbing or just some pictures so that you have great memories to look back on in future years, go at night, get those great little bits of light, and enjoy the holidays.
Well, Sandy, I appreciate you taking the time to experience this party one more time. There's a little bit of magic each and every holiday season, and these parties are a great example of it. Have a great week and have a great Thanksgiving. Folks that you're listening at home, I hope you have a great Thanksgiving as well.
You too.
That's a wrap this week on Let's Talk Diz. If anyone you know could benefit from this or any show, please share, have them like, and subscribe. And don't forget to reach out to the folks at Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services for any Disney destination planning. Make it a great week, and as always, keep making memories.